Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Exorcise Your Rights. Today, we are double dark tiding it. We have two dark tide books to celebrate from Crystal Lake Publishing. And instead of trying to get all the authors in the studio at one time, we have video recording. So you can see I am alone in the studio. I will be alone, but never fear, there is more to listen to than just me talk. So don't run away that fast. The books that we are covering today are from, like I said, Crystal Lake Publishing, which does the Dark Tide series. They started in 2019, I believe. 2012. I'm sorry. Crystal Lake is run by Joe Meinhardt. It's been around since 2012. It just became Crystal Lake Entertainment. So they're expanding with some comic books and a bunch of other things. Definitely worth checking out. You can find them at crystallakepub.com. But back to what we're doing, the first book that we're going to be covering is Dark Tide 9, an Unholy Triquetra, released yesterday, actually, with stories from Jason Parent, William Meikle, and Curtis M. Lawson. I do not actually have a reading from Curtis Lawson at this moment, but his story is Bound in the Valley of Balor. And it's about a corrupt federal agent and a mob informant that find themselves stranded in a remote valley after surviving a plane crash. The blood spilled during a conflict between the two awakens an ancient evil bound beneath the valley. That sounds exciting. Can either of them escape from the Valley of Valor? If you want to find out, you have to get the book, which is available now. A little bit about Curtis. Curtis M. Lawson is a weird fiction author, editor, comic creator, poet, podcaster, and tabletop game developer. His work ranges from Technicolor pulp adventures to bleak cosmic horror. Curtis resides on the outskirts of Providence, Rhode Island. He is the host of the Word Transmissions podcast, and runs Gallows Whisper, an imprint of Weird House Press. But I don't have a video from him today, unfortunately. The story that you are about to hear, though, is A Knot Within a Knot by Jason Parent. The blurb for that one is, a man survives a plane crash only to find himself in darker circumstances with a winter storm on the horizon and an orphaned child in tow. An elderly woman faces off against a god of night and his steed from the confines of her airplane seat, while another hides from night and storm in hopes of a new dawn. Unbeknownst to them, their fates are linked and dependent upon the next two tales. A little bit about Jason. Jason Parent is an author of horror, thrillers, mysteries, science fiction, and dark humor. Though his many novels, novellas, and short stories tend to blur the boundaries between genres. From his epic and E-Festival Independent Book Award finalist first novel, What Hides Within, to his widely applauded police procedural supernatural thriller, Seeing Evil, to his fast and furious sci-fi horror, The Apocalypse Strain, Jason's work has won him praise from both critics and fans of diverse genres alike. He currently lives in Massachusetts, surrounded by chewed furniture, thanks to his corgi and mini Aussie pups. And we are about to see his chewed furniture firsthand right now.
And perhaps hello again if you've seen my other video, but I made two stories for the Dark Tide series. The second one was actually my first one. So, um, in an Unholy Triquetra, Dark Tide series number 9, I wrote a Celtic story called A Knot Within a Knot. So I had originally written this for the Halloween anthology that I did with Kevin Lucia and Jeremy Bates. However, I didn't really think it went with the feel of it, but I really liked the story. It's one of my favorites. Um, so I asked Joe from Crystal Lake if he would be interested in doing another Celtic version. So he said yes, and I got to reach out to two fantastic authors, William Meikle and Curtis Lawson, and invite them along on this journey. So that's how the Celtic trilogy was born. And I also got to write my story Brothers for the Halloween collection. So I got two of my favorite stories out of this this writing assignment, if you call it. But it's been an amazing experience all around, and I really appreciate all the support Crystal Lake has shown for this project. So, without further ado on this one, I wrote a story about a plane crash. A gentleman traveling through Europe, and his plane is over the French Alps. I'm going to start at the beginning on this one, not read as long, so you don't have to put up with my voices as long this time. And I hope you enjoy. Thanks. So, a knot within a knot, part 1. My nails crack against the armrest as what the pilot called normal turbulence spirals well beyond normal. And to think, only 5 minutes earlier, I wasn't afraid of flying. So much can change from just a few simple choices. Deciding at the 11th hour to attend a technology conference in Italy without my family. Electing to leave that convention prematurely to catch an earlier Air France flight home in advance of oncoming weather. Only for an unexpected delay on the runway and for the storm to freakishly change course into the airplane's path mid-flight. And in my haste to make that my ill-fated trip, choosing not to call my wife and daughter to tell them I'm coming home and that I love them. A crack as loud as an 18-wheeler ramming into a boulder rattles my seat. The din is coming from somewhere outside or against the plane. The lights flicker, and someone nearby squeals. Others gasp. Up ahead, a child wails. In the pause between lightning and thunder, a steady string of prayers converses with the pitter-patter of the rain. I release a breath and look past the elderly woman to my right in the hope of catching another glimpse of the wing and its 2 beautifully functioning engines, keeping us aloft and alive. But the shutter is now closed, blocking my view of the raging storm and the pitch black that has swallowed the sky. An unnatural darkness blots out starlight and cabin light. Flashes of lightning are the only means to see anything out there, were there anything else to see. The woman must have closed the shutter. Maybe she saw something after all, something I don't want to see. So I look at her instead, seeking comfort in the presence of a stranger. She is as frail as a wraith, a stick with a kindly smile. Her eyes are closed as she rests her head against her seat. Despite the lurching and jostling that send both my mind and my stomach into an uproar, she seems to have found peace, a lonely island in the eye of the storm, while the rest of us swirl in the tempest. And with each flicker of the cabin lights, her sallow skin and pronounced cheekbones illuminate. Her scalded face permeates my thoughts like a bad omen. The woman greeted me warmly when I took my seat beside her. I understood enough French to pick up on that. But gone now is her charity and her fellowship, and my heart seizes and lungs refuse to operate as I face this storm alone. Hear her deep breaths, forcing the steady rise and fall of her bosom, emit a pulse that is soothing in its cadence, if only I can convince my body to emulate it. And I try. Like counting off a beat, I mimic her breathing and I sit back. As if aping her crests and valleys or mocking my attempts to match them, the plane also rises and falls, but in much faster intervals, tickling my stomach in that nauseating way of cars on hilly roads. With each dip, the plane creaks like a rusty hinge. A strobe light bursts behind the shutters, the roar of thunder chasing at its heels. I imagine the lightning, with its dots and dashes, is speaking in Morse code. The message is clear. You are fucked. A ding sounds, and the captain's voice comes over the intercom. Crackles and dead air break apart his words so much that I don't even those fluent in his language could have found any meaning in them or any hope. Furrowed brows and frowning mouths confirm my suspicions as I glance across the aisle. The captain doesn't bother repeating his message in English, though the sentiment seems universal. We are all going to die. More thunder follows, more lightning, and heavy raindrops pelt our carapace like automatic gunfire. The plane gives off a long groan akin to a whale song, and for a second, both metal and the meat within go silent. Even the hysterical child has lost his voice. Thinking of my daughter, thankful she is safe at home, I hope the kid has fallen blissfully unconscious. I hope the same happens to me. The lights flicker one last time before going out, and the plane pitches downward. I curse our hubris for thinking something that weighs more than 20 elephants should ever transport people through the sky. As oxygen bags drop from the ceiling, a flight attendant bravely rises to remind us how to put them on. His tears, like crystal prisms, refract colored light, brightening his skin even as his expression darkens. A jolt knocks him to the ground, and he doesn't rise, nor does anyone move to help him. The child's wailing returns in earnest, countless banshee souls joining in the chorus. I clench my teeth to bite back my screams. The force of our descent and my locked up muscles pin me to the seat, my fingers clutching to the armrest in a death grip. A hand covers my mouth, and I instinctively shake it away. An elderly woman leans forward and meets my gaze, offering me that same kindly smile she wore when I took my seat beside her. Her steady hands work with a quiet strength as she pulls the strap of the oxygen mask over my head and sets the mouthpiece in place, even before putting on hers. A smile twitches in my mouth. The gentleness of her act with the absurdity of the orange duckbill mask to serve as a fleeting balm to a body prickling with panic. I nod, a short bob to show my thanks. She smiles with her eyes, which gleam with the wisdom of one who has learned to accept what is beyond one's control, and rests a hand on mine. Tears warm my cheeks as I think of the wife and child I will never see again. I am grateful, though, that I do not have to face my final moments alone after all. With an effort of sheer will, I unclench my fingers and take the woman's hand. A blast immerses the cabin in blinding light. A clang, clang, clang falls as if rocks are pelting the aluminum trash can in which I've made the unfortunate mistake of hiding. The plane dips sideways as an endless torrent of wind whooshes through the cabin, forcing my useless eyes shut. Water and what I presume to be napkins and peanut wrappers whip into my face. With them comes a moment of clarity. This is it. And I laugh. The notion that sticking my head between my legs could somehow save me pushes my mind toward hysteria. I grit my teeth, determined to face my end with dignity, as if doing so would earn me the respect of a child who would never know one way or the other. I wonder if I have time to text her to say I love her, that I should have done, like I should have done before. But I have never squandered my affections. Both she and my wife, they know. Still, I don't want to die, and I rage against the unfairness of it all. I summon more anger to displace some of my fear, slamming my head repeatedly against the headrest like a temperamental child. The howl of the wind drowns out all other sounds. My ears pop as I swallow. I squeeze the woman's hand harder and harder as we plummet to earth. Ashamed I haven't had the decency to learn her name or repay her kindness. And that is the beginning of A Knot Within a Knot in Dark Tide and Unholy Triquetra. 3 novellas by myself, Jason Parent, Curtis Lawson, and William Meikle. Thank you for listening.
And thank you, Jason, even though I know you're not here. The video he was referring to, we are going to use in a different show. But yes, another good reading by Jason. Yeah, I'm excited to see this book. It's just come out. I have not seen a copy yet, but I'm very excited to read this. Next up, we have Summons by William Meikle. This is the blurb for that. Would you fall slave to the rhythm? He came to Scotland after the death of his wife in search of peace. But the old house is restless. Something is waking, something noisy, something that will not be denied. His search for meaning in the face of ever-increasing activity in the house leads him down strange occult pathways into deep history and a story that is racing to a finish. The rhythm calls to him. Will he fall slave to it? Or is there a path to be drum master before it subsumes him utterly? William Meikle is a Scottish writer now living in Canada with over 30 novels published in the genre press and more than 300 short story credits in 13 countries. He has books available from a variety of publishers, including Dark Regions Press and Severed Press, and his work has appeared in a large number of professional anthologies and magazines. He lives in Newfoundland with whales, bald eagles, and icebergs for company. When he is not writing, he drinks beer, plays guitar, and dreams of fortune and glory. Don't we all, William? This is William reading Summons.
Hello, my name's Willie. I'm Willie Meikle. I'm a 60-something Scottish lad. I graduated from Glasgow University in botany, had a career in IT in London, Aberdeen and Edinburgh, and left a rat race behind in 2007. And now live in a small fishing town in Newfoundland with whales, bald eagles, and icebergs for company. I didn't choose writing, it chose me. The urge to write is more like a need, similar to the addiction I used to have for cigarettes, and I'm still doing a bit for beer. It's always been there in the background. I wrote short stories at school, dabbled a couple of times over the years since then, but it really took hold when I got into my 30s. Back then I had an idea for a story. I hadn't written much of anything since school time, but the idea wouldn't leave me alone. I had an image in my mind of an old man watching a ghost. That grew into a story, that story grew into other stories, and before I knew it, writing had taken over. That was in 1992. Since then I've sold over 300 short stories and had over 30 novels published in the genre presses, and I've got more in the pipeline still to come, not finished yet. I've been writing full time since 2007. We haven't starved, so I'm doing okay. I want to read a bit from my story Summons from the new Crystal Lake anthology that we're in. I'll start at the very beginning, probably the easiest place. No limbs, no head, no head. Left arm gone, left leg gone. No legs, no head. The row of stick figures was carved with a degree of precision Dave knew he'd never be able to master, but that didn't make it any less puzzling. They were etched in the old beams of his attic, aged in place as if they'd been done at the time the roof space was built. But they hadn't been there 2 weeks ago, and there'd been nobody else in the house for that same period but him. They were an impossibility made possible, only made possible by the fact they were undeniably right there in front of him. He hadn't been up there since the day he'd put the overflow boxes in when he moved in over a year ago, and he'd only come up to get a box of vinyl, having an urge to listen to some early Pink Floyd. That quest was forgotten as soon as he switched on the light. He saw what was carved, not just in the beam above the archway, but apparently on every available slat and strut of wood in the area. The figures marched, a myriad of them, limbs and heads missing, both in some cases, and Dave was still trying to figure out not just what they signified, but how they got there in the first place. Maybe the bulbs going. Maybe they were always there, and it's only because of the dimmer light and shifting shadows that I can see them. He was trying to manufacture a rational explanation, but he'd been up here too long now to be able to blithely explain away this manifestation as a trick of the light. The figures marched, no matter which way he looked at them. It was a new thing in his life, and he wasn't sure he wanted to welcome it. There had been far too many new things in his life these past few weeks, months, even years. One more might be the straw that broke the camel's back to send him spiralling, for despite the fear of the new, his despair of the old wasn't anything he wanted to revisit. He decided to stop trying to deny the evidence of his eyes and take a closer look. No left leg, no head, no limbs, no right arm, no arms, no head, no legs. The figures were arranged in tiny ranks, each an inch high, half an inch wide, and all spaced exactly the same distance apart on either side. With almost military precision, a little marching army. An impossible little marching army. It was a work of great craftsmanship, but simultaneously completely baffling. It made Dave's eyes swim just to look at it, and the more he looked, the dizzier he got. His heart pounded. He beat a hasty retreat downstairs when he started to hyperventilate. 2 minutes later, he was in his front room, nursing a glass of scotch he didn't remember pouring, listening to a pounding in his ears and hoping he wasn't as close to a heart attack as he felt. He looked over to his mantelpiece. "What do you reckon, Anne? Is your old man gone to Lally?" Anne didn't reply. She hadn't replied for a year now, but Dave kept talking to her anyway, kept hoping. If he could hear her, just once, hear her again, everything might make a bit more sense. But she was still silent. It wasn't like her. Dave had never harboured any illusions about any kind of afterlife. He'd been raised Scottish Protestant, church and Sunday school, RE at the Comprehensive, but none of that had taken. He had stayed a pragmatist all his adult life. That didn't mean he couldn't hope. He'd been hoping since she died. He remembered the day every time he looked at the urn. It had been a Saturday. She'd left on the previous Thursday. "It's just a bit of business," she said. "I'll be back before you know it." He'd busied himself in books. She'd gone to get her plane. He hadn't listened to the radio or watched TV, so didn't know there'd been a crash until he got what he afterwards thought of as the phone call. Always hearing it in italics in his head. The only thing he remembered for a while were small words. Died. Instantly. No pain. Tears, grief, cremation, and more grief followed. After a few months, she'd come with him in the urn, out of the city to this house on the coast for a quiet retirement. And quiet it had been. Dave spent his days walking the cliffs and sitting on his porch, watching the ever-changing moods of the North Sea. Every Wednesday he'd wander up to Finsborough for a pint, a trip to the local library. At nights he read, watched old movies, sipped old whiskey. Sometimes, like now, he'd talk to Anne and Hope. It helped. That was Dave's life now. Quiet days and lonely nights. A well-spent life now cast adrift from its moorings, slowly winding down. But now there was this. No left leg, no head, no limbs, no right arm, no arms, no head, no legs. He couldn't get him out of his head. He finished off the whiskey and went back up to the attic. The figures were, impossibly, still there. Still looking as if they'd been there as long as the house had stood. He considered turning his back, closing the hatch and ignoring them, but he knew that would only do it preying on his mind all night. Better to confront them directly. He went downstairs, retrieved his laptop, and returned with it to start transcribing the phenomenon. It didn't take him long. He had small graphics set up for each of the figures, and then it was a matter of methodically cutting and pasting them to order in a document. He picked a random starting point in the first beam above the hatchway and set to it. He was soon lost in the routine of it, falling into a cut and paste rhythm that was almost soothing. By the time he went to bed that first night, he'd managed to copy down 2 struts worth of figures, less than a 20th of the whole thing by his estimate. He went to sleep with marching men flitting across his mental landscape and a pounding drum of a headache. He dreamed he was somebody else. And that's the intro to my story Summons. It deals with a set of ideas, basically, that I'm working out in other books and other stories as well. It's called My Sigils and Totems Mythos. It's a simple enough concept. There are houses all over the world. Most people only know of them from stories over campfires, tall tales told to scare the unwary. But some, people who suffer, some know better. Some are drawn to these places where what ails them can be eased. And if you have the will, the strength, you can peer into another lifetime, where the dead aren't gone, where you can see that they go on and dream the dreams that stuff are made of. And there it is, in a nutshell. There are houses where people can go to get in touch with their dead loved ones. But this gives me a lot of things to play with. To get inside a room, you need a sigil, right, a tattoo or a carving, and a totem, a memento of your loved one. Then there's the fact that your loved one might be a parallel universe version of the person you know rather than the one you actually know. And where do these houses come from? What's behind the walls? How do they work? Why do they work? Who runs them? Who fixes them when they don't work? So I've got all that to play with, plus the fact that houses can exist anywhere in space and time. They're like a lot of boxy little carduses, if you like, spread across places and situations where I can hook characters and stories. And I've written several dozen stories and a couple of novels in this mythos. So this new story, Summons, fits in with these, and in some ways might even be an origin story for the whole thing. But if you want to know more, you're going to have to go and read it for yourself. Thanks for listening.
Fabulous. I love doing this whole show because I get to sit here and listen to so many excellent authors read so much excellent work. So that was Summons by William Meikle. Thank you so much for that reading, William. Now we're going to switch it up a little bit to Dark Tide 10, which is releasing on August 25th. This Dark Tides 10, also from Crystal Lake Publishing, is part of their Dark Tide series. It's releasing on August 25th, and it has stories from Erin Lewis, Armand, Rosamilia, and Jay Wilburn. Unfortunately, most of you probably know that Jay Wilburn passed away last year. His story, Prepared Because Death is Coming, is published posthumously in this collection. A little bit about that story, Prepared Because Death is Coming by Jay Wilburn. Here's the blurb. Take this and bear the warning. When a messenger arrives at Dry Stretch, warning that a horde of zombies is heading our way, 40 years after the fall, Bay scoffs at the news. But a full-body meeting is called. Ethic is sent north to scout, but in Dry Stretch, no one is preparing. No one is repairing the walls. A William Faulkner-esque story of the dead set in a dystopic Dust Bowl town. Jay Wilburn was an author of horror and speculative fiction that lived in coastal South Carolina near Myrtle Beach. He taught public school for 16 years before becoming a full-time writer. His signature series is the Dead Song Legend Dodgecology for younger readers and the Lake Scatterwood Blues. The Lake Scatterwood Tales. I used to watch Jay on Twitch, and that's how I know of him. And I used to always think, I'm going to get him on the show one day, but it just didn't work out. It just didn't coincide. So I do hope you'll get this, just so you can read Jay's story. The Dead Shall Rise book from Dark Tides. The reading you're about to hear is from Erin Lewis. She has a story called Dance with the Dead. Erin Lewis, this is the blurb of that. Tiffany is expecting just another night in the strip club, but when a customer goes berserk in the VIP room, things take an unexpectedly bloody turn. Stuck with a cocaine-rattled manager and a shady club owner, Tiffany faces the unimaginable, is forced to turn her coworkers into allies to fight the evil that has taken over the club. Together, they have to fight to stay alive. Erin Lewis, about the author. Erin Lewis is a former adult entertainer with a love of books, writing, and humor. Her job gave her a unique perspective on life. She spent 20 years as an exotic dancer on and off and started writing nonfiction as a way to shed light on a misunderstood industry and profession. Her passion for writing began with nonfiction, but she has always loved horror fiction. Stephen King, Lois Duncan, and Clive Barker got her through some of the tough years growing up. She found an escape through those books along with countless others. Her own fiction reflects those influences as well as her love of all things dark and maybe just a little bit scary. And this is a reading from Erin.
Hello, I am author Erin Lewis, and in a few minutes I am going to read from you a little bit from my zombie novella called Dance with the Dead. It is part of Crystal Lake Publishing's Dark Tide series, book number 10. It's called The Dead Shall Rise. It's got 3 zombie novellas, one by Jay Wilburn, Armand, Rosamilia, and by me. So quick, I wanted to talk about how I started getting into writing. Not something that I had really actually set out to do. When I was a little kid, I've always had a love of reading and books and really just the written story, especially when I was younger, and people would read to me as a little kid and you could kind of like build the story in your head, and just something I really kind of became fascinated with. And then as I got older and went through middle school, which was not like super fun for me, probably a whole lot of other people also, books and stories, especially like the creepy, the macabre and like horror stories, Stephen King in particular was one of my favorites, but allowed, I guess, a healthy form of escape from some of the the drama of being a kid and a teenager. As I got older and entered the workforce, I discovered, along with a love of reading and horror and maybe some scary stuff, I also had a bit of a disdain for authority. So I found out pretty early on that I make a pretty terrible employee. I ended up becoming an exotic dancer where I could be, self-employed. And I did that for a little over 20 years. I'd say about 10 or 15 years into it is when I started thinking about actually becoming a writer. Up until then, because books had been like such a huge part of my life, becoming a writer felt like trying to become a rock star, or a movie star, something that was really pretty much unattainable, particularly after I started dancing. Not considered one of the most scholarly or intellectual professions. But I started actually thinking seriously about writing maybe about 10 or 15 years into it. You know, going to parties or having to explain to people like what I did. You know, I used to always kind of break the ice with, you know, maybe a funny story or anecdote or things like that. And, you know, it started getting suggested, hey, you should write that down. And I thought, yeah, I should, right? But, you know, it was never really something I seriously considered. But definitely as I got older and I started to notice the narrative, basically the stories and what you would hear and see about exotic dancers or people in the adult industry, on like talk shows and like movies, Showgirls comes to mind, not pleasantly. I actually started to get a little irritated with, you know, what I heard out there, because for me, it didn't reflect my experiences or the experiences of people that I worked with. And, you know, it felt very contrived. It felt like it was all intended to really fit within the stereotype that people kind of already thought, you know, that dancers are drug addicts, or they go on to be prostitutes, or they're, you know, broken or hurt in some way. And that just wasn't my experience. Not that, you know, everything was positive. It certainly wasn't. But, you know, it wasn't, what I saw reflected in the media wasn't really the spectrum of experiences that I knew. So basically, I decided to write my memoirs. And that ended up being my first book. I put it out on Amazon, hoping, really just happy that it existed. Just, you know, I had finally done this thing, and that was it. Armand, one of the authors in this compilation, actually found it and has really been a huge catalyst for me to continue writing. I ended up writing 2 more nonfiction books about the adult entertainment industry. And then Armand and I wrote a crime fiction novel called Stripper Noir. I went on to write my first solo novel called South of Heaven, and several short stories in this novella. I just had another novel also accepted, so hopefully that will be coming out fairly shortly. So anyway, it's sort of, I guess my writing, my books, they all came about, really began with a love of reading, and just the written word and other people's stories, and my need to really want to tell my own story. So really a love of reading and maybe just a tad of spite is how I started writing. And now I'm going to read a little bit from my story, Dance with the Dead, a zombie novella, which is, well, it's set in a strip club. Kelly seemed to have stopped banging on the door. Roxy had been quietly going through the cabinet. We have 1 rifle left and 2 9mm handguns. The rifle is an AR-15 and could probably take out all of those fuckers at once. I've only shot one once. I've never shot a gun at all, I said. Me neither, said Charlie. We all looked at Lexi, who had some color back in her face. I used to go to the range with my dad. I can handle a gun. In fact, I can handle the rifle. Well, I don't want to sit here and wait for Mike, Roxy said as she started to take out the guns and boxes of ammo. She brushed the Coke off the table and onto the floor and laid out the guns and one really big knife. I don't like guns. I'll take the knife, Charlie said. Lexi got up and started to load the rifle, while Roxy prepared the handguns. She showed me quickly how to load it and where the safety was. We must have made too much noise because the banging started on the door again. Someone's going to have to handle Kelly first, I said, and felt like a jerk. I said handle because I couldn't bear to say kill her. She was such a sweet girl. I was trying not to think too much about all that stuff right then. It was so scary, but so sad. I had liked Kelly and Sid and Eric. Even strung out, Lenny wasn't that bad. Not to mention all the other people who had just come in last night to have a good time or make some money and go home. None of them deserved any of this. I know most people look at strip clubs as dirty, nasty places for deviants. I know my parents did. But they're just full of regular people, for the most part, good people even, and at any rate, it's an honest place. Everybody that goes or works there knows the rest of society already thinks they're all scumbags. So the people who work there are like a weird little community, bound by stigma, a family of misfits. I know, Charlie said. I will. I got the knife. I'll put her down easy when we open the door. I don't think we want the noise of the guns bringing the rest of them up here. Thank you, I said, and I was grateful. Let me check the cameras again before we do this. I wanted to make sure all the dead were still there where I saw them last, but I was also trying to buy some time. I played a good game, but I was scared. Adrenaline was keeping me from really freaking out. It's only now starting to wear off. But then, while we were all still alive in that little filthy office, I wanted a moment to make sure I was ready. The VIP room was still empty, as was the back of the main room and dressing room. I switched to bar view and studied it for a moment, which was stupid, because it was still empty too, but I stared at it anyway, trying to buy a little more time, and saw Bob's head. It had rolled under a rack. Why did they have to have such clear cameras? Lower quality would have worked just fine for their purposes. But no, they had to put these HD high-tech cameras that allowed me to see all the details of Bob's ruined head. I could see each ragged shred of skin from his severed neck. It looked like they had used a steak knife. I could also see that his tongue was hanging out. I leaned over to the side of the desk and threw up. I wiped my mouth and sat up. I closed my eyes for a minute to let the nausea pass. I clicked the mouse before I opened them again and saw the view of the stage. It looked exactly the same as when I looked at it last. The same 4 dancers clustered around the pole, all reaching up towards something. I looked for a zoom function on the camera, and when I found it, I zoomed in. I could see that there was something on the pole. The undead strippers were all reaching for it. I leaned in a little closer and saw the bottom of Lenny's shoes. So that was part of Dance with the Dead, part of one of the zombie novellas in The Dead Shall Rise, Crystal Lake Publishing's Dark Tide series, book number 10. So I hope you pick that up, and I hope you enjoy it. If you want to know a little bit more about me, or if you are interested in any of my books, you can find links to all my books at erinlewis.com, as well as links to all my socials.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Erin. Last but not least, we have Zombie Diner by Armand Rosamilia, in where a family finds themselves on the wrong side of the zombie apocalypse while on vacation in Florida. Armand Rosamilia is a New Jersey boy currently living in sunny Florida, where he writes when he's not sleeping. He's happily married to a woman who keeps his career and is supportive, or who helps his career, and is supportive, which is all he ever wanted in life. He's written over 200 stories that are currently available, including crime thrillers, supernatural thrillers, horror, zombies, contemporary fiction, nonfiction, and more. His goal is to write a good story and not worry about genre labels. He also loves to talk in third person because he's really that cool. Maybe. You can find him at Armandro. Sorry, it is very hard to read it when it's all together. ArmandRosamilia.com for all his information, as well as random things he enjoys. And I will put that web link in a banner. And now let's hear this story.
Diner. You could also find a novella from the late, great Jay Wilburn, representing Jay wearing one of his shirts, and also Erin Lewis, I'm not representing with one of her shirts, but I wish I was. So I'm going to read you a little excerpt from the Zombie Diner, first page or so, and then I will, talk for a few minutes, if you will bear with me. Zombie Diner, Chapter 1. Grady Harper wondered if the waitress was even wearing underwear. Probably something frilly, or maybe a thong, he thought, and smiled to himself. Louise squeezed his leg under the table and leaned close to him. One more time you stir that little whore's ass, and I'm leaving. Grady ignored his wife and went back to his coffee, which was getting cold. He raised his hand to get the waitress's attention, but thought better of it. Better leave that well enough alone for now. I'm going to the bathroom. Not alone, his wife hissed. She turned to their son, Drew. Go with your father to the bathroom. Drew grimaced and looked to his younger sister, Isabella, for help. She ignored her family, head down on her plate of pancakes. Fine, he finally said. Izzy is coming with me. Stop calling her that, you know she hates it. Drew smiled. Don't care. He crossed his arms. If Izzy isn't going, I'm not going. Grady leaned over and was glad he was in public, or he'd probably lose it on these two little ingrates. Both of you get up and follow me now. The diner was packed. Grady fought his way past the main entrance, where 30 people were lined up. The hostess, a young girl with pretty eyes and pert boobs, smiled wanly at him. What, are you giving away free food? He said with a laugh. She shook her head. They said on the radio they're closing I-10 down. Seriously? We were trying to get back to Louisiana, but the cops blocked it off. We had to turn back, an older gentleman said from in line. A few others piped in, telling about other major roads being closed coming south and north. As if on cue, a police car, sirens roaring, sped past them outside. Grady rubbed his temples and went to the bathroom, but there were at least 6 people in line waiting their turn. He tousled Drew's hair, even though he was 16 and hated it. The boy was almost as tall as Grady and a spitting image of his mom. Same attitude as well. He turned to his 15-year-old daughter and sighed. She also looked like Louise and had the same attitude and hatred towards him, mostly ignoring him. Excuse me. She was supposed to have been Daddy's little girl, but somewhere a long time ago, she decided to side with Mommy and gang up on him. Even he liked calling her Izzy and pissing her off, using the excuse that he's always called her that from the time she was a baby, and it was cute. A dad came out of the bathroom with 2 small children in tow, both wearing black mouse ears. As if reading his mind, Drew spoke up. When we get there, I'm not wearing those stupid baby things. Your sister will. Doubt it, Drew said, and pulled out his cell phone leaning against the wall. Drew was right. With his son, he could at least plead and beg and make a joke out of it until Drew would reluctantly put the damn things on. Isabella? No effing way. This trip to Orlando was supposed to have been fun and a bonding experience for the family, especially after Grady's affair. Affairs, he thought. But she only knows about the one. Just as well, if Louise ever found out her brother's wife or Stephanie from the bank, she'd leave him for sure. Not to mention the next door neighbor, June. He hadn't wanted to stop. They were only a couple of hours from Orlando and had just gotten into Florida, but the kids were hungry and the wife was bitchy and he needed a break. As people crowded into the diner, he was amazed that when they'd gotten here 40 minutes ago, the place was half empty. Now it was wall-to-wall customers. An ambulance followed by a fire truck went by outside. Everyone in line turned and stared. The news just said there's some huge accident or something in Georgia, someone in line said. My cousin in Atlanta said they're closing the city up. He just posted on Facebook. Time to go, Grady said to his son. He had a bad feeling about all this, whatever this was. By the time he got back to the table, a fist fight had broken out in a corner, probably over a seat. Louise stared at him with contempt. What took you so long? Did you con the waitress into a stall with you? Grady ignored her taunt. We need to leave. I'm not done, she said. As the noise level rose in time with Grady's pounding headache, he grabbed their plate of food and smashed it on the floor. No one seemed to notice. We are leaving. Let's go. The Harper family pushed through the crowd. Grady caught a last glimpse of the waitress inside. She did have a great ass. What's going on? Louise said as they got to the minivan. I'm not sure. Grady opened the doors with the key just as a fireball rose from the north, followed by more sirens. They piled into the car, but Grady didn't start it. What's wrong? You rush us to leave, throw my food on the table, don't pay for dinner, and now we're waiting for what? The cops over there to arrest us? Louise smacked the dashboard. Grady had his stare fixed on the other side of the busy road. What are they doing? He finally asked, transfixed. The homeless people? Who cares? Can we go? He couldn't quite put his finger on what was odd about the group. There were 4 of them, dirty and covered in something. One was on the ground and seemed to be fighting off the others, but then that one stopped struggling and all 4 stood. What's on them? Drew said from the back seat. Is that blood? No way. They'd be dead if they lost that much blood, Louise said calmly. Grady felt like they were watching a movie with disinterest. Those are the idiots who do the zombie walks. I saw it on G4. I think there's one in Jacksonville this weekend, Isabella chimed in. Grady was about to make a snappy comment about her first words spoken in the car the entire trip when one of the homeless people / zombie walkers moved straight into traffic and promptly got run over. Holy mother of God, Louise said. Did you see that? Stifling down another snappy comment, Grady got out of the car. What the fuck is going on? Before the body was done flying through the air, the other 3 members of the entourage also stepped into the street and were hit. A car behind the initial accident tried to steer away and ending up slamming sideways into 2 cars. But we'll end it there. So that is the opening of Zombie Diner. Obviously, people are in a diner. Obviously, there are zombies. It's not really a spoiler. This novella was started many years ago. And I never finished it. I got about halfway done with it, and it petered out because it was supposed to be part of, ironically, part of a group of authors all writing novellas or novels set in the same zombie world. And I created this chapter as a starting point for all of us. And I think there were 3 or 4 authors, and one dropped off, and another one ended up finishing his story quickly and then selling it to a publisher, which was annoying. So the whole thing just kind of died out. So this has just been sitting as a trunked, unfinished zombie book for years and years. Of course, I write the Dying Days 9-book series of zombies. So at some point, I was like, well, I'll get back to this eventually, and I'll put it out in part of that world. And then I started doing crime thrillers and more horror and other things, and I just never went back to it. I really didn't think about this. And then when Joe from Crystal Lake said, hey, I want you to do a zombie trilogy, a zombie novella trilogy, you pick the other people. What do you think? Immediately, I thought of Jay Wilburn. Jay Wilburn and I have written 4 or 5 books together. And before his untimely passing, we started this, and he actually blew through it. So my idea was to get somebody who was established, which was Jay, and then get a newer author who I'd conveniently just written a book, a crime thriller noir book with, Erin Lewis. And so my thing was, I think the 3 of us writing different zombie novellas. There's no tie-ins, but I thought it would be a lot of fun to do this. So we did it. Jay turned in his book, his novella, and then he passed away last October. And so it's fun to be able to have another release with Jay and I in it together. And I'm excited for this book release. I'm excited because I rewrote pretty much the whole thing. There's the same characters. By the way, Isabella is my middle child, who was always a pain in the butt. So that's kind of fitting for her to be in here. And there's a lot of, I try to keep the tone. I try to keep a lot of the other things that are in the original version of this together. And I think it succeeded. It's a fun story. It's a novella. It's fun. Is it tied to the Dying Days series? Maybe. There's no reason it couldn't be. I did not name it. I don't believe I named it Dying Days the Diner or Zombie Diner. I think I just called it Zombie Diner. So there you go. I hope you enjoy my book coming out. I hope you also enjoy the other 2 stories that are also in this one. And it is very exciting to be part of this series with book 10. So thank you very much.
And that ends the show. What exciting stories. I hope you enjoyed this whole segment with these videotaped authors. Thank you so much for everybody who contributed a video reading. And I hope I'll see you next week for more.